There's a lot of different routes the Jets could go to get their number one wide receiver this offseason. They got the NFL draft. They have free agency. Well, let's talk about the trade market. Here are 6 guys I think could be moved this offseason.
Jets, Jets, Jets!
All right, welcome to Jets Talk. My name is Ryan. I'll be your pilot. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. If you've been here before, welcome back. I love having you here. Boys and girls, we're talking trade, specifically trading for a wide receiver. Ever since Joe Douglas had his end-of-season press conference and he said he was not afraid to give away assets, trade assets, draft picks for proven NFL caliber talent, it got me thinking, where can we look in terms of the trade market? Because everyone knows the Jets are going to be in the market for a number one wide receiver. Well, I have 6 guys here that I want to go through, and I'll give you my rankings at the end for who I would prefer to trade with or trade for. But before we get into that, let's look at some previous trades for wide receivers that have gone through the last few years. Odell Beckham Jr., first, a third, and Jabril Peppers. Important note, he was already signed, so his deal was already done at that point. Brandon Marshall was traded for 2 second-round picks a long time ago at this point, from the Broncos to the Dolphins. Brandon Cooks was traded not once, not twice, 3 times. a first-round pick, and a second-round pick. He's now on the Texans. Amari Cooper was traded for the 27th overall pick when he went from the Raiders to the Cowboys. So interesting stuff all the way around there. Let's jump into my 6 wide receivers that I think could potentially be moved this offseason. At number 1, I've talked about this guy before recently. Calvin Ridley, 6'1", 190 pounds. He's 27 years old. Not this past year. This past year he only played in 5 games, but last year, 2020, he had 90 receptions, 1,374 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He did miss all of this season with the exception of 5 games due to mental health concerns. Now, one thing to keep in mind, Elijah Moore, our wide receiver for the New York Jets, helped A.J. Brown, the wide receiver for the Titans, while they were both at school in Old Miss. And A.J. Brown was going through some mental health issues as well, and he really says and comes out and is open about Elijah Moore helping him through all those struggles. So I do think the Jets have that potential help in the locker room, specifically at the position already. So I do like this. Now, if traded, he's on a 1-year, $11.1 million deal. The whole idea here is that there is a rift between him and the Falcons organization. I would not give up one of our 2 top 10 picks. I would give up either one of our second-round picks along with Denzel Mims to facilitate this trade. The other thing I wound up hearing that was pretty intriguing is if the Falcons want to come up and get a quarterback, they're currently picking at number 8, they could jump up to number 4. Now, that leap from 8 to 4 is about the value of a mid-second-round pick. So maybe you decide to trade Denzel Mims and slide back from 4 to 8 to allow them to get their quarterback. Because you do know there is a premium when jumping up to go get your quarterback. So you can't really go just by the trade value chart at that point. I would do either one of those. Either one of those I think would make perfect sense. I think Calvin Ridley is the perfect fit for this offense. The next guy up on my list is someone I didn't realize was actually sort of available or might be available. And that's DK Metcalf. He's 6'4", 235 pounds. He's 24 years old. So he's about to go into the prime of his career. He's got 1 year left on his rookie contract. So if traded, it would be a 1-year, $1.1 million deal. This is a weird one for me because the Seattle Seahawks have a ton of salary cap space. They have like $70 million worth of salary cap space coming up this offseason. This past year, he had 75 receptions, 967 yards, and 12 touchdowns. The guy's had like 30 touchdowns in his first 3 years in the league, which is bonkers. Absolutely insane. The whole idea here is that Russell Wilson is he's got his foot out the door. He doesn't want to be in Seattle anymore. So maybe instead of paying DK Metcalf an insanely high salary, maybe you wind up hitting the reset button, getting what you could get for him now, and Russell Wilson and just hitting reset. Because clearly they don't have any draft picks thanks to the New York Jets in the Jamal Adams trade. So probably unlikely that they would wind up trading with us again. Look, I really like DK Metcalf. I don't think I want to stomach the amount of assets that it would take to give up to get him, because the receiver you take at number 10, you really hope that receiver turns into DK Metcalf, but I don't know if I want to pay that receiver $25 million a year right now. You have your quarterback on his rookie contract, so maybe you do that, but God, it's a tough ask. This is going to be a very, very expensive trade if you were to do it. Next guy up is Jarvis Landry. It seems like he is poised to be cut by the Cleveland Browns. He is 5'11", 196 pounds. He is 29 years old. This past year, he had 52 receptions, 570 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The Browns would save $15.1 million by cutting or trading him. You would inherit a 1-year, $15 million deal if you were to trade for him. And the Jets have the cap space. So $15 million is not that big of a concern for the New York Jets. It's just a matter of, do you want to trade for him and how much would you be willing to give up? At this point, I think it's a major salary cap dump. I don't think he's going to get traded for a whole heck of a lot of money because ultimately they're going to wind up cutting him anyway. I would offer a 5th-round pick. I think there's, one of our late picks that we have in this draft. If you can get a guy that's still a high-end number 2, a low-end number 1, I think that's a good deal. Next guy up, we've talked about before. Might get traded again. Maybe not. Brandon Cooks, 5'10", 183 pounds. He's 28 years old. This past year had 90 receptions, 1,037 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And they need draft assets, the Texans do. They're going to wind up trading Deshaun Watson. They have a new head coach coming in. They're going to want to kind of build the team their way, so they're going to break it down to the very, very bottom. Now, Brandon Cooks has come out and says he does not want to get traded for a 4th time. So there's a real good shot. If he doesn't like your team, he's not going to want to play for you. So more than likely, he's going to try and pressure the Texans into cutting him, in which case you might be able to sign him to a free agent contract. But that being said, this is not an area I think I would go if I were the New York Jets. It does save them $8.7 million if they make the trade, and you would inherit a 1-year, $13.2 million deal. So it's really not that bad for your number 1 wide receiver, but I think he's not quite the type of receiver I would like to have. He's a little bit on the shorter side. The next guy up we've talked about again as well, and that's Amari Cooper, 6'1", 210 pounds. He will be 28 years old at the start of the season. This past year had 58 receptions, 865 yards, and 8 touchdowns. The Cowboys are currently slated to have $2 million in salary cap space, factoring in rollover from this past year. They don't have enough space to sign their draft class, so they need cap savings. Amari Cooper would save them $16 million against the salary cap if they cut him. So maybe you look at this. This is an interesting option. This might not cost you a whole heck of a lot because he has 3 years left on his contract at $20 million a year. That is a significant overpay for Amari Cooper at this particular point in time. Now, do you wind up sending a later round pick for Amari Cooper? They wind up saving the same amount of salary cap space, but they get a draft pick in return. And in return, you have to take on that contract. I think while you have a rookie quarterback, this is probably the time to do it, and you have 3 years left on his contract, which is probably about how long I'd want to have a big number 1 wide receiver on a big deal anyway, before we had to pay Zach Wilson. God, that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money, $20 million a year. It would be interesting. I think he would be a very good scheme fit with us. I think he's a crisp route runner, and I think it would make a lot of sense. Interesting. The final guy up on my list is Michael Thomas. This is someone that a lot of Jet fans and just NFL fans have talked about for the last year and a half or so. He's 6'3", 212 pounds. He's 29 years old. He's had an interesting last few years. In 2019, he had 149 receptions for 1,725 yards and 9 touchdowns. Then in 2020, he winds up hurting his ankle in the first game of the season, tries to play through it, winds up playing in 5 games, has 438 yards and no touchdowns, and then wound up deciding to get the ankle surgery that he needed in 2020 in June of 2021. So he wound up missing all of this season because of it. So you have to determine, is this an ailment that's going to keep bothering him, or is surgery going to fix it and he's back to 1,700-yard Michael Thomas again? Interesting thought process here. The Saints are $56 million over the salary cap right now. So they need to get some cheaper players on that team by way of draft picks or just trading away some salary. Right now, this move would only save $2 million for the New Orleans Saints, and it would help them in years after that once they clear all this dead money off. Now, he has 3 years left on his contract. It would be $15.5 million, $15.7 million, and $18.7 million, and you'd be able to cut him at any point in any of those years because he has no guaranteed money left. So this is fascinating for me. How much would you be willing to give up for a receiver that could be of Michael Thomas's caliber, his height, his speed, his route running? The contract's pretty reasonable, but you haven't seen him play in a year and a half. It's interesting. It's really, really interesting. I would err on the side of caution here. Maybe a third round pick is what you offer them. Now, he may have to go for higher than that, but you got to be careful with how much you're giving up and how much you want to kind of wheel and deal. Maybe you consider one of the second round picks. I don't know. It's interesting. It's very, very interesting. So let's talk about the 6 wide receivers that we just went through and how I would kind of rank them in order. Calvin Ridley is my top guy. First and foremost, I think he is the most attractive of the wide receivers if he becomes available. Michael Thomas, for me, contract-wise, and I think the amount of draft capital that you'd have to give up to get him might not be that bad. Amari Cooper is fascinating. It's just the contract that's really tough. So if you're okay with eating $20 million a year for a guy that's not a top 5 wide receiver at this point, maybe you consider that. Jarvis Landry, I think, is a really good wide receiver. I think that would make a lot of sense right here. Then you get down to Brandon Cooks and DK Metcalf, and I think for different reasons I have them towards the bottom of this list. I'm going to say DK Metcalf next because I think he might possibly be traded, but he's just so expensive. I don't know if I want to give up that much in assets. And then Brandon Cooks seems like he doesn't want to be traded, so maybe you just don't even go down that road. So could be traded to a team that he likes, but may wind up ultimately getting cut. So guys, those are my 6 wide receivers that I think the Jets could possibly target or could be hitting the trade market. Let me know in the comments down below, which one of these do you want to see in a Jet uniform most? Which one do you want to see in a Jet uniform least? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, go Jets.
Jets!